Ever since consoles were powerful enough to feature full voice acting, it's no wonder that the level of cinematic storytelling in video games has exponentially increased. However, just like film and TV, perhaps even more so, video game voice actors are not immune to being replaced. Iconic characters can be recast to a myriad of different responses. Some of these new takes are loved equally or generally regarded as better. Several, however, can divide or upset entire fan bases. I'm Cy for WhatCulture.com, and these are 9 video game recastings that pissed everyone off. Number 9. Prophet of Truth, Halo 3. Halo 2 introduced the San Shium, also known as the Prophets, the figureheads of the series' mighty alien force. They had been behind the formation of the Covenant and were guiding their people to trigger the end of the universe. After the deaths of the Prophets of Regret and Mercy, only truth remained, and the promise of chasing him into the franchise's 3rd installment was enticing. Michael Wincott had played the Prophet of Truth as deeply conniving and charismatic, the kind of character that could believably lead the charge of a very misinformed army. The first time players hear truth in Halo 3, however, is alarming, as his words break out over the sound system of an underground human base. Terrence Stamp's replacement voice makes the once great leader sound like a rambling old man. Swapping his scheming nature for something more unhinged loses a lot of weight from the role, turning Truth from a believable cult leader into a deranged drunkard. Reportedly, Michael Wincott chose not to return to the character, which ultimately is a shame, and fans can only imagine what his gravitas would have brought to the conclusion of this original trilogy. Number 8. Claire Redfield, Resident Evil Revelations 2. The Resident Evil series is no stranger to voice actor changes. For example, in the English dub, Chris Redfield alone has been played by no less than 5 different men, and don't worry Chris, we're getting to you. It's his sister, however, whose recast upset fans the most, probably because she went the longest without a change. Alison Court portrayed Claire Redfield in Resident Evil 2, Code Veronica, Dark Side Chronicles, the CGI movie Degeneration, and more, and was deeply appreciated by the Resident Evil community. She even worked behind the scenes as more than an actor, directing the voice cast for the Outbreak games for PlayStation 2. When Claire Redfield finally returned to the Resi universe in Revelations 2, fans and Alison herself were saddened to learn that she had a new voice. James Baker delivered a decent performance with what she was given, but the simple fact was that fans felt shortchanged. The warmth and resolve that Court had brought to Claire had defined the character for over a decade, and Baker was a pale imitation. It was sadly no surprise that the series forged on without her, recasting Claire once again for the 2019 remake of Resident Evil 2. While Stephanie Panisello did a great job, she'll always be working in Alison Court's shadow. Number 7. Irving Lambert, Splinter Cell Pandora Tomorrow. Fisher was only as good as his backup, and the back and forth between him and his boss and old friend Lambert, played by Don Jordan, made the game sing. The slow, methodical and stealthy action of Splinter Cell would have lost a lot of potency without the pair's patter and Jordan's deep guiding voice. There's no official given reason why Don Jordan skipped out on the sequel, but one theory is that due to Pandora Tomorrow and Chaos Theory being made at the same time by different arms of Ubisoft, it's possible that Jordan may not have been available for both. Instead, Lambert is portrayed by 24 actor Dennis Haybert. Haybert's performance was solid and he provided a good take on the character, but it's telling that he never returned to the role. Sam Fisher was defined in the first game in part by his relationship with Lambert, who in the eyes of fans is and always will be Don Jordan. Number 6. Frank West, Dead Rising 4. The original Dead Rising is a special case where it's very clear the game doesn't just wear its influences on its sleeve so much as every inch of its body. A zombie apocalypse that drops players into a shopping mall? Of course I want to play a video game version of Dawn of the Dead. That being said, what made it so memorable was its sense of humour, which was carried to the forefront by TJ Rotolo's performance of journalist Frank West. Slimy, arrogant and wisecracking, Frank was the kind of protagonist who was a bit of an arsehole, but that's what made him entertaining. And you had to respect the guy. He'd covered wars, you know. Rotolo played Frank across many appearances in the series' side games, but when Dead Rising 4 brought the journalist back to the lead role, fans were left disappointed by a voice change. Many replacements run the risk of feeling like an imitator, but Ty Olson's round as Frank could barely be called that. Technically speaking, fine, it was the fact he was so far removed from what players were used to that it was hard to think of him as Frank. Capcom defended the choice to recast, saying that the older Frank needed to sound more grizzled, but considering Rotolo's extensive portfolio, it seems entirely disrespectful to assume he couldn't have done great things evolving his original take on the character. Number 5. AERITH, Kingdom Hearts 2. When Kingdom Hearts dropped Final Fantasy characters into its scrambled Disney universe, for many of them it was the first time they had been given a voice. Largely, it seems that careful consideration had been taken with the casting, as well as Disney's budget and name value. After all, David Boreanaz was far from being a nobody when he briefly played Leon, Kingdom Hearts' equivalent to Squall. In particular, Mandy Moore's turn as Aerith was a wonderful take that managed to be light, airy and wistful without losing its way into dim-wittedness. She was soft, motherly and tough all at once. Unfortunately, it only lasted for a brief moment, and the last Cetra was one of many characters who were recast for the sequel. Enter Mina Savari, whose take on the character was that Aerith was a one-note narcoleptic. Whilst her tone of voice was fine, every line that Savari's Aerith delivered sounded as though it was coming from someone about to yawn. In all likelihood, this was a direction problem, as she did a much better job when she played Aerith for the CGI film Final Fantasy VII Advent Children. Nevertheless, this early attempt quite rightfully drew ire, and likely sits at the bottom of the list for most fans when it comes to Aerith's portrayals. Number 4. Chris Redfield, Resident Evil 7. In order to get away from the established lore and allow new players an entry point to the series, Resident Evil 7 had a brand new location and set of characters that almost never touched on the series' history. However, in the final scene, a shock reveal left fans very confused. After surviving the ordeal, protagonist Ethan Winters is saved by a soldier who introduces himself as Redfield. The face for Chris was so insanely different from his previous appearances that fans began a spate of theories that this was some kind of strange Umbrella-made clone, or even the face of a previously masked hunk. Future DLC confirmed it was in fact Chris Redfield, who simply had a new face and a new voice to match him. David Vaughn's portrayal was close to previous Chris voice actor Roger Craig Smith, but fans were unhappy. Even when playing from a first-person perspective, knowing how dramatically different Chris's design now was caused fans to reject the entire redesign. Capcom listened and adjusted accordingly for the follow-up 2021's Resident Evil Village, which sat at a strong medium between the two. Vaughn didn't return and was replaced by Jeff Shine. Considering Shine had played Carlos in the previous year's Resident Evil 3 remake with exactly the same voice, this was another controversy all on its own. Number 3. Sam Fisher, Splinter Cell Blacklist. Sometimes fans can grow attached to the voice of a character because an actor has been with the series since the start, such is the case for Michael Ironside's Sam Fisher, but there's more to it than that. In the early development of Splinter Cell, Ironside was an instrumental part of shaping the writing of Sam's background and creating a character that was more than just an avatar for the player. In 2013, Ironside passed the torch to Eric Johnson for Splinter Cell Blacklist. Eric Johnson's turn as Sam Fisher was maligned by the fanbase because it strayed so far from all the work Ironside had done. Gone was the iconic grit, replaced instead by something altogether more bland and forgettable. In the ensuing years, Ironside admitted that he stepped away from Splinter Cell due to being diagnosed with cancer and his grapple with mortality. Since overcoming his diagnosis, he has returned to the role of Fisher in a special mission of Ghost Recon Breakpoint, giving fans hope that he'll be back in the goggles for future installments. Number 2. Snake, Metal Gear Solid 5. There are several reasons why the Metal Gear Solid 5 recasting was so controversial and became such big news. Firstly, a household name like Kiefer Sutherland taking on the role of a beloved video game character was unheard of. To many, this was a warning sign for things to come, for voice actors being overshadowed by names that could sell products. What really upset Metal Gear fans though was the treatment of David Hayter. Hayter had played the role for decades at this point, tweaking the voice into new iterations every time. In the West, Hayter's Snake was and still is perhaps the most iconic video game voice of all time. After all, who hasn't gurgled out Metal Gear in Snake's beloved gravelly tone before? However, the Japanese studio simply didn't seem to hold the same value of Hayter's proven track record and swapped him for the easy attention grab of a Hollywood A-lister. After over 15 years, Snake's voice was suddenly different, and it was a talking point that followed the game everywhere it went. Number 1. Everyone, Silent Hill HD Collection. In 2012, Konami decided it was time to squeeze the teat of the Silent Hill franchise for some extra cash by releasing an HD collection comprised of Silent Hill 2 and 3. One of the selling points was a new set of voice recordings, which was something sure to set fans on edge. The new recordings weren't bad by any means, but perhaps the word inappropriate is more accurate. Gone was the strange otherness, replaced instead by the most generic take on every character. Troy Baker's deep and emotive turn as the previously notoriously soft-spoken James Sunderland was a particular sore spot. Fans felt that it was a massive disservice to the power of the franchise's unique tone. Whilst Silent Hill 2 had the option of the classic recordings, the new version of Silent Hill 3 is unavoidable. Tom Hewlett, who worked on the project, said that due to technical and logistical factors, Silent Hill 3 would be playable only with the collection's new voice acting. This left many fans to flock to eBay and pick up the original PS2 version to play the game as originally intended. And that's the list. Let us know what you thought of this video down in the comments below, and any other video game recastings that personally put you in a bad mood. Make sure you like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe and hit that notification bell. I've been Si for WhatCulture, and have a good week.